a network of roads so masterfully built that 2,000 years later, parts of it are still in use today. This was Roman mastery at its finest, an engineering marvel that didn't just connect an empire, but actually shaped the future of humanity itself. Now, here's what blows my mind. How did a civilization without heavy machinery or GPS manage to create a road system more durable than many modern highways we drive on today? And what does this tell us about the sheer power of logistics throughout history? Welcome to Imperium Chronicles, where today we're going to uncover the incredible secrets behind the construction and maintenance of Roman roads, the very system that allowed Rome to dominate the ancient world. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around until the end, because I'm going to reveal a Roman technique so advanced that NASA still uses it today. But before we dive into this epic journey through time, make sure to hit that like button, ring the notification bell, and share this with anyone who loves history as much as you do. It really helps the channel grow and brings these amazing stories to more people who are passionate about the past. So buckle up, time travelers. We're about to discover how Rome literally paved its way to becoming the greatest empire the world had ever seen. Let me take you back to the year 312 before Christ. Rome was still a growing power, not yet the mighty empire we know from the movies. It was then that a man named Appius Claudius, holding the prestigious office of censor, made a decision that would literally change the course of history. Appius wasn't just any politician. He was a visionary who understood something that would escape many leaders for centuries to come. That power isn't just about armies. It's about being able to move those armies exactly where you need them, exactly when you need them there. So he began construction of what would become known as the Via Appia, the Appian Way, and historians would later call it the Queen of Roads. But here's what's fascinating. This wasn't just about building a nice path between cities. This was military strategy at its finest. You see, Roman legions could march an incredible 30 kilometers per day on these roads. That might not sound like much in our age of cars and planes, but imagine you're an enemy commander in ancient times. One day there's no Roman army in sight, and just 2 days later, thousands of disciplined soldiers are at your gates. That's the power of logistics, my friends. But the Via Appia served another crucial purpose: political control. These roads didn't just move soldiers. They moved Roman culture, Roman law, Roman governors, and Roman influence into every corner of the expanding territory. Now here's a detail that absolutely blew my mind when I first learned about it. You know how Roman roads are famous for being incredibly straight? Most people think it's because the Romans lacked sophisticated surveying technology, but that's completely wrong. The Romans were brilliant engineers. They made their roads straight as arrows for a much more clever reason: to prevent ambushes. Think about it strategically. If you're marching a legion down a winding mountain path, enemies could be hiding around every bend, ready to attack when you're most vulnerable. But on a straight road, you can see for miles in every direction. Any potential threat is visible long before it becomes dangerous. It was a tactical masterpiece disguised as simple engineering. Now let's get into the real magic, how these roads were actually built. And when I say magic, I mean it. Because what the Romans created was nothing short of miraculous engineering that has survived wars, earthquakes, floods, and 2 millennia of wear and tear. Picture this. You're a Roman engineer tasked with building a road that needs to last forever. No pressure, right? But here's the genius part. They didn't just throw some stones on the ground and call it a day. Oh no, they created what I like to call layers of perfection. Let me walk you through this incredible process, because it's like watching master craftsmen at work. First came the statumen, the foundation layer made of large stone blocks. These weren't just randomly placed rocks. Every single stone was carefully selected and positioned to create an absolutely solid base. Think of it as the skeleton of the road, the unshakable foundation that everything else would rest upon. Then came layer number 2, the rudus. This was compacted gravel, but not just any gravel. Roman workers would pound and compress this layer until it was rock hard, creating a surface so tight that water couldn't penetrate it. The amount of manual labor this required was absolutely incredible. Teams of workers with heavy tools compacting every single inch by hand. The third layer was called the nucleus, a mixture of sand and mortar that acted like ancient concrete. This is where Roman innovation really shines, because they had perfected the art of creating binding materials that were actually stronger than many modern equivalents. This layer smoothed out any imperfections and created the perfect base for the final surface. And finally, the crown jewel, the summum dorsum. These were perfectly cut stone blocks, fitted together like pieces of an intricate puzzle. Each block had to match its neighbors so precisely that you couldn't slide a knife blade between them. The skill required for this level of craftsmanship was extraordinary. These weren't just construction workers, they were artists working in stone. But here's the innovation that really gets me excited, and it's something we still use today. Lateral inclination for drainage. The Romans figured out that if you build your road with a slight slope from the center to the edges, rainwater naturally flows off to the sides instead of pooling on the surface. This single technique has prevented countless roads from being destroyed by water damage over the centuries. Modern highway engineers still use this exact same principle. Every time you drive on a highway and notice how the water runs off to the shoulders during a rainstorm, you're experiencing Roman engineering genius that's over 2,000 years old. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting, because building these incredible roads was only half the battle. The real challenge was keeping them in perfect condition across an empire that stretched from Britain to the Middle East. And this is where Rome created something that might sound familiar to anyone who's ever dealt with government bureaucracy. Meet the curatores viarum, the road inspectors. These were the unsung heroes of the Roman Empire, though I'm not sure they saw themselves that way. Imagine being responsible for maintaining thousands of miles of roads, ensuring that every stone was in place, every drainage ditch was clear, and every mile marker was standing straight. These inspectors had one of the most thankless jobs in the ancient world. But here's where it gets fascinating. The Romans didn't handle road maintenance with their own crews. Instead, they contracted the work out to private companies. Sound familiar? They basically invented the public-private partnership model that we still use today for infrastructure projects. The curatores viarum would inspect the roads, identify problems, and then oversee the bidding process for repair contracts. They had to ensure the work was done properly, on time, and within budget. And just like today, this system had a major flaw: corruption. Oh yes, corruption in government contracts isn't a modern invention. Roman historians wrote extensively about inspectors taking bribes, contractors using cheap materials, and politicians steering lucrative road contracts to their friends and family. Some things never change, do they? There were scandals where contractors would use inferior stone, skip the proper foundation layers we just talked about, or simply pocket the money and disappear. The curatores viarum were supposed to prevent this, but many of them were in on the schemes themselves. It got so bad that emperors had to create oversight committees to watch the inspectors who were supposed to be watching the contractors. But here's something absolutely mind-blowing that shows just how sophisticated Roman communication was. They used mile markers as a form of ancient social media. These weren't just distance markers. They were like stone Twitter posts from the emperor himself. Picture this. You're traveling along a Roman road, and every mile you encounter a stone pillar with messages from Caesar. Sometimes it was propaganda about recent victories, sometimes announcements of new laws, and sometimes just imperial bragging about how great the roads were. It was the emperor's way of staying connected with citizens across the vast empire, 1 mile marker at a time. Speaking of roads, I'm curious, if you could travel back in time and walk along any Roman road, which one would you choose? The famous Via Appia, leading to the bustling port of Brindisi, the Via Augusta stretching through the Spanish countryside, or maybe the Via Flaminia crossing the beautiful Italian Apennines? Drop a comment and let me know which Roman highway calls to your inner time traveler. Now I need to talk about something that's uncomfortable but absolutely essential to understanding the full story of Roman roads. Because behind all this incredible engineering and lasting beauty, there was a much darker reality that we can't ignore. The truth is, These magnificent roads that we admire today were built on the backs of slaves and prisoners of war. When Roman legions conquered new territories, they didn't just take the land, they took the people. And those conquered peoples often found themselves forced into the brutal labor of road construction. Picture the scene. Thousands of men, chained together, hauling massive stone blocks under the scorching Mediterranean sun. They were the ones breaking rocks for the statumen layer, carrying endless loads of gravel for the rudis, and positioning those perfectly fitted stones of the summum dorsum. The beautiful craftsmanship we talked about earlier, it came at an unimaginable human cost. Roman engineers and supervisors designed the roads, but it was enslaved workers who actually built them. They worked in terrible conditions, often without adequate food or shelter, and many didn't survive the back-breaking labor. Some historians estimate that building just one major road could cost hundreds or even thousands of lives. And here's something that really puts it into perspective. When you see those incredibly straight Roman roads cutting through mountains, remember that every single foot of that path was carved out by hand. No dynamite, no bulldozers, just human beings with hammers, chisels, and pickaxes, many of them working against their will. But the human cost wasn't the only price. These roads were incredibly expensive to build and maintain, and the Romans had to get creative about funding them. Enter the toll system. Yes, the Romans basically invented highway tolls. Travelers had to pay fees at various checkpoints along major routes. Merchants especially paid hefty sums for the privilege of using these superior roads to transport their goods. It was like an ancient version of our modern highway taxes, except you paid every time you used the road. But here's where Roman politics gets really interesting. Wealthy politicians and aspiring office holders would often fund road construction as a way to buy public favor. It was their version of campaign promises made real. They'd sponsor the building of a new road or the repair of an existing one, and then make sure everyone knew exactly who had paid for it. This was all part of what Romans called panem et circenses, bread and circuses. Politicians knew that if you kept people fed and entertained, they'd support you. Well, good roads were part of that formula too. Give people smooth, safe travel, and they'll remember your name come election time. Some ambitious politicians would spend their entire fortunes on road projects, seeing it as an investment in their political careers. They'd hold grand opening ceremonies, put up monuments with their names, and basically turn infrastructure into personal branding. Sound familiar? But here's the thing that really gets to me. These roads brought genuine benefits to millions of people. They facilitated trade, spread knowledge, connected families, and yes, helped build one of history's greatest civilizations. But we have to remember that this progress came at a tremendous cost in human suffering and exploitation. And now we come to perhaps the most incredible part of this entire story, the legacy. Because even though the Roman Empire fell over 1,500 years ago, their roads are still shaping our world today in ways that would absolutely blow your mind. Let me start with something that's going to sound completely crazy, but is absolutely true. You know Route 66, America's most famous highway? The legendary Mother Road that stretched from Chicago to Los Angeles and became a symbol of American freedom and adventure? Well, its designers actually studied the layout of the Via Appia when they were planning the route. Think about that for a moment. American engineers in the 20th century were looking back over 2,000 years to learn from Roman road planners. They admired how the Romans had created not just a transportation route, but a cultural pathway that connected distant regions and facilitated economic growth. Route 66 wasn't just inspired by Roman engineering principles. It was designed to serve the same function that the Via Appia had served for ancient Italy. The Romans understood something that we're still learning today. Roads aren't just about getting from point A to point B. They're about connecting cultures, enabling commerce, and literally paving the way for civilization to spread. Route 66 brought that same transformative power to 20th century America, helping to unify a vast continent just as Roman roads had unified the Mediterranean world. But here's where this story gets absolutely mind-blowing, and it's the payoff I promised you at the beginning. Are you ready for this? NASA. Yes, the space agency that put humans on the moon is currently studying Roman road construction techniques to figure out how to build roads on the lunar surface. I'm not making this up. NASA engineers have been analyzing those four-layer Roman road systems we talked about earlier because they've realized that the principles the Romans used to create durable surfaces on Earth might be exactly what we need to create lasting infrastructure on the Moon and eventually Mars. Think about the parallels. Both environments are incredibly harsh and unforgiving. Roman roads had to withstand extreme weather, heavy loads, and constant use for centuries without modern maintenance equipment. Lunar roads will need to handle massive temperature swings, cosmic radiation, and the challenge of construction in a low-gravity, airless environment with no possibility of easy repairs. The Romans solved the durability problem through their layered construction system and their understanding of drainage and load distribution. NASA scientists believe these same principles could be adapted for extraterrestrial construction, using locally available materials like lunar regolith instead of Roman stone and mortar. It's absolutely incredible to think that techniques developed by ancient engineers using hand tools and human labor might help us build the infrastructure for humanity's next great expansion into space. From the Via Appia to the Sea of Tranquility. Now that's a legacy that has truly survived the test of time. And you know what's even more amazing? All over Europe, you can still walk on actual Roman roads. Parts of the Via Appia are still used by modern traffic. In Britain, many major highways follow routes that were first laid out by Roman engineers. In France, Spain, and throughout the former empire, Roman roads continue to serve communities just as they did 2,000 years ago. These weren't just construction projects. They were investments in the future of human civilization. And that future, it turns out, extends far beyond anything the Romans could have imagined, all the way to the stars themselves. So here we are at the end of our journey through time, and I want you to think about something profound. Roman roads were so much more than just stones and mortar laid across the landscape. They were symbols of power that announced Roman dominance to anyone who traveled upon them. They were highways of culture that carried ideas, languages, religions, and innovations from one corner of the empire to another. And perhaps most importantly, they were mirrors of society, reflecting both the incredible ingenuity and the troubling contradictions of Roman civilization. These roads remind us that behind every great achievement in human history, there are stories of brilliance and sacrifice, of innovation and exploitation, of dreams realized and lives lost. The same hands that created beauty also enforced bondage. The same minds that solved engineering problems that had stumped civilizations for centuries also devised systems of oppression that we find morally reprehensible today. And that brings me to a question that I think is worth pondering. What will future archaeologists and historians say about our roads, our infrastructure, our civilization? When someone 2,000 years from now looks back at our highways and bridges, our tunnels and airports, what stories will they tell about us? Will they marvel at our technological achievements while questioning the environmental cost? Will they admire our global connectivity while criticizing our social inequalities? Will our infrastructure inspire future space colonists the way Roman roads inspire NASA engineers today? I think about this every time I drive down a modern highway. Somewhere, centuries from now, there might be a historian making a video about 21st century transportation systems, talking about how we solved problems that seemed impossible, while also grappling with the moral complexities of how those solutions came to be. The Romans built roads that lasted millennia, but they also built a legacy of questions about progress, power, and the price we're willing to pay for civilization. And maybe that's the most important thing these ancient highways can teach us. That true greatness isn't just about what we build, but about how we build it and who bears the cost. If this journey through Roman engineering and politics has taken you on the kind of time travel adventure that makes you see the ancient world in a completely new way, I'd love for you to hit that like button and share this with friends who appreciate history as much as you do. And definitely subscribe to Imperium Chronicles, because we've got so many more incredible stories from the ancient world coming your way. From the secrets of Roman military tactics to the mysteries of lost civilizations, there's always another fascinating chapter of human history waiting to be explored. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and keep traveling through time with us. See you on the next adventure, fellow time traveler.